A Operations Committee meeting to order, and I need an approval for the agenda. By Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Lightfoot, and Mr. Smithers. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. I have two announcements. Due to extenuating circumstances, Legislator Jeanette will attend remotely from 1350 County Road 53, Brazier Falls, New York, 13613. Legislator Curran will attend remotely from 9 Coventry Drive, Messina, New York, 13662. Can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes of April 10th by Mr. Fay, second by Mr. Hall? Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Probation. Page. The first motion we have is authorizing the chair to sign the alternatives to incarceration ATI service plan contract. And do I have a motion by Mr. Sheridan, second by Mr. Perkins?
So this resolution is asking the board to give the chair permission to sign the grant that we were approved recently for the ATI program. The funds stayed the same. It's $28,421. That amount of money goes towards paying a supervisor position that supervises the ATI program. So it helps offset the costs for salary.
Is there any question? Another.
This grant doesn't begin to cover the total cost of the program, does it?
No, so the total cost, her total salary is $106,812. That's with benefits. And so it only covers, like I said, a small portion of her salary.
So can you explain why we have this? What if we don't have it? What happens? What's the purpose of this? I'm not familiar with it.
Of the ATI program.
Yes.
So it's an alternative to incarceration. So basically our staff goes to the jail every morning. We haven't been since COVID. We've been doing it. But we interview anybody that's been arrested. We make a recommendation to the court on release status. Cashless bail that's paid up already set in stone, which is least restrictive. Most people are released under their own recognizance, depending on if it's one of the qualifying. So the ATI program right now is kind of limited on what we do. It's more of just screening and moving towards the district and the recommendation.
Thank you. Is this a mandated program that we have to have?
Yes.
Any other questions? No further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. The next resolution. Opposing Senate Bill S 6282, an act to repeal section 257-C, the executive law relating to probation administrative fees. To amend the executive law in relation to prohibiting certain fees associated with probation, and to amend the correction law and the executive law in relation to termination and discharge of certain sentences. Is there a motion? By Mr. Sheridan, second by Mr. Burke.
So this resolution is asking the board to join me in opposing this bill. This bill is set up to repeal section 257C for the executive law. This section gives counties the right to pass local laws allowing us to collect certain fees. This is the yearly resolution. I come to you and ask for write-offs. This is the write-offs that we're looking for. So it's on our drug testing, supervision fees, and any administrative fees, meeting our surcharges we collect on this too. So we passed this. So we did this back in 1994, allowing us to do this. And now the state is looking to do away with this collection fees. So for our county, for the last 5 years, we've collected just shy of $192,000. And you got to keep in mind too, that was during COVID where we didn't have a lot of face-to-face contact, so we weren't collecting probably as much as we could have had we been face-to-face. administrative fees for restitution, so you're talking our stamps, our writing of checks, paper, envelopes, all of that, that would not be reflected. Drug tests, it helps offset the price of some of the drug tests. The 5-year expense for drug testing was $62,645. We were able to collect $31,619 of that. And again, that was with during COVID, where again, we weren't collecting much money. What's that relate to as far as drug testing goes? We average about 28, we averaged in those 5 years about 2,800 tests a year. Again, we only did about 2,000 tests in 2020, which actually I was kind of shocked at that number, considering we barely saw any clients. So to do 2,000 tests kind of was shocking to me. So generally, we test over 3,000, it's probably about 3,600 tests a year. Again, so the county would have to pick up that expense if we're unable to collect from probationers. So I'm just asking that the board back me in opposing this bill.
Any questions? Seeing no questions, all in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. President. Next up is planning. Jason Fulton. The resolution is authorizing the addition of one parcel of 0.3 acres to agricultural district 1 and 8 parcels totaling 358.5 acres to agricultural district number 2. And is there a motion by Mr. White? What's the completion?
Thank you. Good evening. So this is a resolution that you see every year at this time. The county has 2 active agricultural districts, which are used to promote and encourage the agricultural industry throughout the county. And there's an opportunity on an annual basis for property owners to bring parcels that are currently not in the ag district into the ag district. And this year we have 9 parcels, 1 in ag district 1 and 8 in ag district 2, and are looking for adoption to include those parcels in the ag districts.
Any questions? I have 1.3 acres in ag district. That's like a sliver.
It is. Right, and the reason for that addition is there's a requirement that if you want to combine parcels, they need to be completely in out of the ag district. So the property owners would combine them. And it's quicker to bring it in than to exclude it from the ag district. And just reviews where parcels can be taken out only occur every years, whereas inclusions occur every year.
Ms. Curran, do you have a question? Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Next up is IT, Mr. Johnson. The resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with New York State TEC for Virtual Chief Information Services Officer, VCISO, and modifying the 2023 budget for information technology. Do I have a motion? Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Denisha and Mr. Hall. Go ahead, Mr.
Good evening. What kind of IT director? What the paper used to screen here. So first of all, the caption should read to sign a contract with NISEC Virtual Chief Information Security Officer Services. Just to clarify. So what is, and we call those in the biz VCSOs. What is a VCSO? Why do we need one? And why did I pick NISEC? When you're talking about C-suites in any organization, governments included, the The Chief Information Security Officer obviously is focused on just security matters. It is normally a larger organization that employs a full-time CISO. The average salary of a CISO is over $200,000. That's one of the reasons that we don't have a full-time one now. But a number of years ago,
You didn't want the job.
if you're offering that, I will gladly take it, Mr. Reagan. Seeing the need and knowing that there are a lot of organizations that have the security need but didn't have the bankroll to support a full-time CISO, many security companies began offering what they call virtual CISO services. So you could buy a pool of hours, get the benefit of an expert in the field to give you expert guidance tailored to your organization, and basically pay by the hour as you could afford and as needed. So the way that we have structured this agreement reflects that. It reflects where we've come, because we've taken a number of steps already in the county. We have a ways yet to go. Having someone who is security focused will help us address and stay on the things that we need to. It's a many tentacled monster, and having someone whose sole job it is to focus on it will aid us greatly. So they know not only what's going on in the security world in general, but in working with us, become familiar with our environment and can tailor that expert knowledge to exactly what we need. Add to that the reality that with local governments, there are a number of free and low-cost services available. Why would we pay somebody when we can get the same thing for nothing? We have employed some of those to date, and there are more yet that we have to do that with. So, and NICETech is a company that we've already worked with to this end. They piloted us through the spending of BOE's cybersecurity grant. We are almost done with that, so they've been great to work with. A very solid company in that regard. So happy to entertain any questions you have.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Not a question about the resolution. Do we need to make a friendly amendment or a motion to change the heading of the resolution? So I make that motion or friendly amendment, right?
Second, by Mr. Smithers, and all in favor of the friendly amendment?
Aye.
Any other questions? No further questions, all in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sure.
Just want to share a little bit of news with all of you, but it also is a great demonstration of some of the challenges we face as a municipality, often held hostage by civil servants. So the board created in June of 2021 the position of Director of Information Technology. And shortly thereafter, Rick promoted into the interim role. And this is one of the unique positions like probation, where it is a tested position in order to attain that position fully. It's not just an appointment of the board. I'm happy to share with you 2 years later, just about, Rick has successfully passed his exam, and we're going to move forward with making that no longer interim. So it is a long process that is full of blood, sweat, and tears, but very proud of Rick's work on this as well as the exam. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to indigent defense. Ms. Doyle.
So Mr. McGahan is coming up to join me. As you may be familiar, budgetarily, we split the Earl Herring, the indigent legal services, and the capital perseverance fund amongst 3 budgets. That includes James Budget as public defender, our conflict defender, Amy Dona, as well as the contract we just approved with ATB or assigned counsel. Before you tonight are three resolutions. They have come with, at least as far as we can tell, some long time discussions with ILS. ILS is an agency of the state that is grown from one person running the entire operation to, I think, 6 or 7 now. Maybe close to 10
Yeah, they're growing. They try to grow each year.
as budget will allow.
Yeah.
And so before you tonight, the first resolution is for years 3 and years 4 of a 5-year contract.
First resolution, authorizing the chair to sign contracts with New York State Indigent Legal Services for years 3 and 4 of the referral hearing contract. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Denisha and Ms. Curran.
So this grant is the Rural Aaron grant, which is basically a lawsuit that says the state is constitutionally defective in the way it handles Asian defense. This is year 3, year 4 that we're dealing with now, April 1st, 2020, to March 31st, 2022. This covers 2 positions in my office, position in the top office. Gordon Brothers, who's our data manager for this grant, as well as other fees and services that we've used over the course of those past 3 or 4 years. The state, $342,000 in year 3, $496,000 for. This funding also provides for additional services.
That's a reminder that this way address criminal and family. So they're very specific in the types of reimbursement we can seek. They have been very long drawn out contract discussions across the state. We are not different in that way from other counties who are now seeking those reimbursement dollars. Our hope is that we can pull these together, get them submitted before the state makes a determination that they're going to take that money for other terms. So that's why it's before you tonight.
Are there any questions?
What drives the increase in the price is like 500% difference between year 1 and year 5. What makes that happen?
So it's a phase in, basically, part of the deal with this funding is that you have to start coming into compliance with case load standards. So the idea was so the state, this is all state costs, was to build it up through those 5 years. We budgeted again in this year, past 5th year officially, but it is. So it's just a build up.
Any other questions? Mr. Burke?
The state has held back this money, or we're just.
So the process of negotiating what your plan was, you have to submit a plan each year. And that process, depending on what years you're working on, took a long time. A lot of turnover for ILS, as well as a little bit of turnover here while we were negotiating. So year 1, I don't believe we had until year 3. And then year 3 and 4, I think we got basically final from the state last, let's say November. So we're getting that. Just had our 5th year. A couple weeks ago.
Once you negotiate and get those budgets approved, then you wait for them to put that into a contract, which in some cases take longer than a year.
Go ahead.
So are we fully phased in?
Yeah, so year 5, was actually last year, up to March 31st, 2022, but it's budgeted in year 6 in the next resolution.
Was that money that we,
Assuming, as long as it's budgeted, I don't believe there's any chance the state necessary to relitigate this issue. Because they did admit, so.
Any other questions? No further questions. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next resolution, authorizing the chair to sign a contract extension with New York State Indigent Legal Services for the Pearl Herring funding, extending the 5-year contract to a 6-year contract. Do I have a, all right, Mr. Perkins, second? Mr. Dees.
So this portion is to allow us to sign an extension once we get our 5th year approved. The status we just spend on it and use it for that funding for the next year.
Part of the challenge is, as James mentioned, there's authorization to hire attorneys. Well, I think there's no one on the board that's unfamiliar with the challenges we face in that area. And so when we don't spend those funds, in many situations, we're allowed to move those forward into the following year, hoping we do, or that we can repurpose that budget. So this will allow us to recapture some of those dollars that may not have been able to spend.
And one thing I would ask, there's positions in year 3 and 4 that we haven't created yet. Staff since this full effect. We get close and then some.
So any questions? No questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Next resolution, authorizing the chair to accept the third council at first appearance grant for 2020-2022. To sign a contract with the New York State Office of Indigent Legal Services. And do I have a motion? By Mr. Hall, second by Mr. Perkins, Mr. Denisha.
So this grant is a council first appearance grant. It allows for a stipend for attorneys to go out in the middle of the night to do arraignments. Our current stipend is $200 before 10 p.m. and $300 after 6 a.m. No matter what day. That covers again all service providers. In this, it covers the legal secretary position in my office, keyboard specialist position, conflict defender's office, has some fees for notaries, staff development, investigative services, and things like that. This grant will be basically submitted as soon as it's approved. Extended response. So it should get 237,000 approximately of reimbursement.
This grant, as many grants exist, to identify where there are weaknesses, how money should be spent, and they let you try out some of the different types of ways you would do that. We were a county that determined our existing staff could go out during the day. They're not paid separately from the salary they already are paid. In the evenings and weekends, this is when they also are provided the opportunity for this stipend. This also goes for our 18B assigned council panel. Part of the challenge was bail reform and many of the changes that happened a few years ago now, that threw all of this into a flux because there weren't those arrests. They were released with a ticket and an appearance. And so that changed the desk appearance ticket response for all the offices and the discovery component that really shifted the workload in the middle of the grant period, trying to identify where you have an attorney who shows up at appearance, this is the idea, and sees that client all the way to the end of the proceeding. That is what the test was. We have not been successful. Sometimes we are, but the majority of the time there's either a conflict identified or a reason why we can't move forward with that attorney representing that client. So that's also part of the measure of this grant, because they believe in improving representation with the same person from the case at the arraignment all the way through is a better representation for that individual.
And the way all ILS grants work is they kind of build on each other. So HH, which is Royal Herring, kind of assumes the continuation of CAF and daily distributions as part of their funding source. Our offices. Their form did change quite a bit because they have desk appearance tickets, so we are going to force more frequent.
Any questions? Seeing no questions, all in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
And one thing, everyone knows here that the increased as a result. We also have another attorney. I'm not sure if this was part of it, but it certainly helped her. Have ASO relief.
We attended the NISAC Zoom meeting this morning, and $150 an hour, all the week is just shy of 300. Will be an issue. Move on to vacancies. First up, the sheriff.
So I'll give my short report. We do have, I believe, Under Sheriff joining us. The Vacancy Review Committee met on May 2nd, reviewed 12 positions that were already created in the budget. Just to give you the statistics I like to keep you current with, in the month of May, beginning, we started out with a 7.5 vacancy rate. That's about 65 positions of our 864. Now that excludes your per diem and your part-time. Those are full-time positions. As a reminder, we keep the year cadence in August, and so we track that throughout the year for vacant positions. Generally, we see between like the 155, 165 an annual number, around 17% that come through. This year, we're trending. We've seen 119 since August, and if that trend continues, we'll be at 142.8 when we come up to August, and that's in keeping our 3-year average is 150.6. So we're right around that same range. In looking at some of these, the ideal vacancy rate, and I think when we visited Corning this summer, 10% was the number they referenced as far as the vacancy rate, and that's ideal. Generally speaking, the average is more like 15 to 20%. And so we're higher than we should be, but in 17%, we're right in that area. And I'd like to get a handle to give you an understanding of what we're looking at for days vacant per position. Right now, the industry standard's about 42 days, and in the US, it's 36 days from position being vacant to being filled again. So I'd like you to be able to measure that against what our number is, so that you have working knowledge of that. That being said, we only have one on tonight, and that is for the sheriff's office. Under Sheriff?
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is a vacancy for a corrections officer, corporal position. Obviously, this position lends to our flexibility for scheduling with supervisory coverage in an effort to, reduce our overall overtime costs and, efficiently operate the facility.
Anyone have any questions for the under sheriff? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
County Administrator's report.
A couple items, as Chairperson said, referenced that through pretty much an hour with counterparts across the state, talking about the impacts of the budget. I would like also to bring you finance and understanding of the impact on our departments. Some I think weren't that optimistic going into this budget cycle. Seeing it come in so late, understanding that everything is on delay, seeing those reimbursements turn around, and many have been waiting. And in those first quarter reports you saw last month, those revenue numbers were low because we had no budget to pull from. So our hope is we'll start seeing an improvement in those numbers coming through. I can tell you that no sales tax bills, they went through the machinations we had to do this year where we had to have a special meeting to approve the 2-year instead of the 3-year. The governor had requested again permanency for that sales tax up to 4%, which would catch St. Lawrence County in that. Not approved, once again, for home rule. There have been no hotel, motel, or mortgage tax renewals approved this year, and only one sales tax renewal approved so far, and that's for White Plains. So their recommendation to us was to make contact with your state representatives, try and get those bills advanced, which we'll do, before we get to the end of session and things get held up that are not tied to sales tax at all, but end up being the negotiation to finish session. So our hope is we'll start seeing some of those come forward. They didn't speak optimistically about the NRIM, which we've spent some time talking about this year, and those proceeds having to go back to the property owner. They indicated today that Senate and Assembly have both approved. It will be up to the governor to make a determination on that. That will completely transform the process the board's been supportive of, the commercial property properties and most recent residential property program of cleanup around the county. So I just want you to be aware that's not signed into law yet, but it looks like it will be. And that is of great concern. Of course, conversations about the cases that are pending, but not a great deal of optimism, as we've seen in other years where it got thrown out and, made some conversation, but really didn't get much momentum. So wanted to mention that to you. Also wanted to make sure that you are aware the Title 42 ends Thursday evening at midnight. There are some conversations. Our EMS director and director of public health attended a meeting at Customs in Ogdenburg today. Their understanding is there are folks in Canada waiting to cross when that expiration occurs. So Matt is working on both a request of the Red Cross for the trailer with the cots, beds, blankets, and also for the identification of a shelter. As many of you are aware, we often utilize the shelters in the schools. Schools are in session. That doesn't make that easily accessible to us. So those conversations are continuing so that we're ready. He will bring updates to me that I will share to you as well. And I wanted to mention to you, City of Ogdensburg lost their phone and internet this morning due to a line being cut in Waddington, a fiber line being cut in Waddington. So we've been dispatching for them all day. They do not have a read yet on when that will be restored. So we'll continue to dispatch for them until they are restored with service. Wanted to mention also too, that special board meeting has been requested for before finance. That's the 22nd. That will be, some of you, I think that we're working on broadband are aware, the Northern Board Regional Commission has approved the application process. That doesn't mean we'll be approved. That means we can apply, but it is a requirement that we have matching funds committed. And so in order to meet the timeline, we need to submit the application ahead of our board meeting. So we'll have a special board meeting on the 22nd before finance to approve that or to consider that resolution as well. And lastly, the fun thing, the town or the village of Canton is organizing a scavenger hunt for the Eric Carl book, Brown Bear, What Do You See? And so what they'd like to do is to have permanent statues 5 inches in height, permanently mounted around the village. They're going to have a scavenger hunt. And so they've invited the courthouse to be a part of that scavenger hunt and let them know I bring this to you. They're looking at raising funds. They need about $22,000 to do it, not asking us for money. And they have about 13. And so they're working toward a September rollout of this with a Columbus Day weekend timeframe, but it would put the courthouse on the proverbial map for the village of Canton and their scavenger hunt. Is there any objection to joining in that? They're happy to come in and talk more about it, but I think it's an exciting piece to bring folks to Canton and certainly be a part of it. Okay, any questions for me?
Mr. Lightfoot.
Back to the property foreclosures. Is there a vehicle worked into this law or whatever it's going to be for people that have had in the past the very thing that they are trying to avoid now happen, where they would be eligible to look back and get funds that were over and above what the taxes were, if in fact they were there? In other words, can they look back? I'd be interested in, okay, thank you.
On the same lines, just the tax levy against property, or is it also like some municipalities clean up properties? What is it that the state proposes to do? Does it include cleanup costs?
I'll find out.
Any other questions? Yeah, I attended that Zoom this morning. Well, it was discouraging to say the least. Motor vehicle days are gonna go from 12.75 down to 10.5. On the flip side, we'll get 10.5 of the people that do it online. So we gotta figure out what that difference is, what proportionally people do online as opposed to pay over the counter. 60,000 migrants have been shipped to New York City first of the year, I believe. And the plan is to start shipping them all over the state, I believe, but
Okay.
upstate.
Wherever that
We live in upstate.
Neighboring counties.
Or Westchester.
There was just one thing after the other, which, didn't paint a very rosy picture. I think. It's very name to say. Mr. Reagan.
For the county administrator, Ruth, how many in Canada are looking to come across?
They weren't shared numbers, though they said there are quite a few. And so there is a concern that warrants at least making the request to have the tent trailers, the cots, and things like that, with their shelters ready, prepared.
So they won't tell us, or?
I'm not sure they know. We asked the same question and they didn't have a solid number. I can see if there's any other intel we can grab them.
Mr. Webster.
Not tent cities, they would be requesting a trailer that has cot, blankets, and toiletries available, and then we're working to find a shelter. We have some MOUs in place with schools, with the scenario that the schools would be shut down or not in session, and that's not the case right now. We would need another location identified, and that's what they're working on with the Red Cross.
These would be illegal.
I'm not sure they'd be illegal. Not sure.
If you put them in schools and you don't find a place for them.
Not schools. We wouldn't be able to use schools. Normally, we would use schools when students aren't there. We need another place now.
County would pay for all this.
There's not funding at this time to offset the cost.
That's a surprise, isn't it?
You all second?
Yeah.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you. What kind of coordination do our agencies have with Border Patrol?
They met with them today, so I believe they'll continue those conversations throughout. Yes,
Continue. Okay.
very good.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we should have some buses ready and ship them down to Washington DC. I'd be for that.
Okay.
Pay for the gas. Diesel.
It'd be cheaper than social services.
Mr. Burke.
Just, there's been some reports that I think in New York City would make. So these people stay, I mean, is that a possibility? After that, if you're. Not $400, but that,
Cost
yeah.
for placing them in a secure location. Secure meaning not acceptable.
What's the other caveat to that? Tourist season. Hotels are gonna take- Pretty interesting. Mr. Bay, I'm just.
Tomorrow, making jail. The, should we talk to, Catholic Charities about, seeing if they could, assist us in, helping these people go to where they really want to go? Because I'd be very surprised if their goal of leaving Canada is to settle in St. Lawrence County. They probably want to go somewhere else. And Catholic Charities, I know, has had experience in the past working over in the Plattsburgh area with migrant families that are stranded.
Certainly, I think we'll have to have some conversations about making translator services available.
And I think they can help you with that.
Ms. Kern, did you have a question? Any other questions? Said that, move on to committee reports. First up, Ag and Farmland Protection Board, Mr. Denisha. Alternatives to Incarceration Board, Mr. Burke.
Nothing to report.
Board of Trustees for Supreme Court Library, Ms. Saggard.
Nothing to report.
Emergency Medical Services Advisory Board, Ms. Curran.
You're muted.
Believe you're on mute.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So we did not meet in the month of April. And I just got the minutes from our meeting in December today. So I will send those along. We did meet as a breakout group. They have an interest in us giving them funds to spend. I told them that I doubted people would be interested in just doing that. However, they might look at some subsidies, towards hours or towards more education or something that they have to do. We are way behind what other parts of the state are paying paramedics to come in and do work, which is why we're having trouble answering calls. And it ends up being a problem much of the time, especially trying to get sick people out of here. It's not very often that companies can fly. The weather, any kind of weather really limits them. So it's a problem that we have to work on, but I don't think the answer is just giving people money. And then they brought a specific application to me wanting to know whether or not we would fund it for the Clarkson program. And the person had no ties to this area. They just had applied to get us to pay for their paramedic program. So I think we have to talk about and figure out, I personally think if I'm funding your paramedic training, you should be attached to something local and know that it's going to come back and be positive for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Curran. And that was addressed today as well. That's an issue downstate, all over the state, I guess. Environmental Management Council, Ms. Terminal.
Thank you. Our last meeting was on April 19th, and the bulk of the meeting, we didn't have a presenter this time. The bulk of the meeting was kind of reviewing the past year, some of the efforts that the EMC has undertaken, thinking about what we've done that's gone well, what areas we could focus on, and kind of setting some priorities. As most of you know, John Tenbush is retiring soon, and so he'll no longer be staffing the EMC. So I think in that transition process, just thinking about moving forward and what our goals should be. We've got several new members that have been appointed, not several, but quite a few new members that have been appointed recently. So we just wanted them as stakeholders to be able to share their opinion. So really just kind of looking at the kind of a planning session, visioning process. And in one of the questions that they had asked is, where were the Board of Legislators? The EMC was founded by, it was established by resolution through the Board of Legislators, what would the Board of Legislators like the EMC to continue working on in the upcoming year? So that was one of the questions we talked about. We reviewed some of the stuff like the Black Lake management, just kind of wondering where, what happened with that, where it went to. There was the organization that did the study there and was supposed to make recommendations, and it seems to just have maybe paused. We're not really sure where that's gone. And then talking a little bit about St. Lawrence. The St. Lawrence River was voted the #1 bass fishing in the world. And so thinking about how do we prioritize and to ensure that that continues happening, both environmentally, but economically as well. And I think that was the bulk of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Our Advisory Board, Mr. Denisha.
Sure, we met on April 20th. In one of the biggest topics of conversation was the tax law, 10% reduction in property taxes. And obviously that would affect, would there are a number of volunteer firemen, EMS workers that would not benefit from that because they rent. So it would be absolutely. So after a lot of discussion, and I had actually prior to the meeting, I talked with Senator Stack in regards to there's some conversations that are being held trying to change it so that it's fair to everybody. So the Fire Advisory Board asked that we had a law here that had table, and they requested that we table the resolution, which I was pleased that it was. But we also we sent a letter to Don McCarthy on the board he had been on the and the next meeting is we changed it from 7 p.m. to.
Thank you, Mr. Preacher. Yeah, that was talked about today, and apparently the state plan did not pass. One half, Senator. I think Senate passed it, and the Assembly did not. More discouraging. Jury Board, Mr. Sheriff.
Chairman of the jury board has not met recently.
Thank you. And Planning Board, Mr. Fay.
My last meeting was on April 13th. Some projects were sent back for local review. We had one full review, a site plan for a biodigester project in Lisbon. And our next meeting is Thursday, and I believe as spring comes, Thursday, Jason said we've got 8 projects for full review.
Thank you very much. Moving on to old new business. We have the results of the feasibility study for the evaluation of biosolids process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of you may remember, some of you worked here last year. I had a municipal wastewater treatment operator contact me, talk to some of the other treatment plants in the county. They thought we could have some efficiency by building a plant or utilizing a plant that was centralized. Also with the concerns that there was a lot of leachate liquid of the biosolids going into the landfill, which had to be taken out and sent to another plant. So what we did is we did a study with Dank. We used some ARPA money. Dank did a study. We utilized the planning department, which helped a lot. Larry Denisha was involved. And we looked at the 21 municipal wastewater treatment plants. They all worked in conjunction. Everybody was in on this. We tried to make it feasible to build a plant locally or to utilize a plant locally. And the basic goal was to reduce the liquid leachate going into the plants or the landfill. After the study was completed, they did different scenarios. It wasn't feasible. It was costing us $27 a ton more than it would if we were to do it than what is currently being done now. But there's different scenarios that are happening right now that in the short-term future, things may change. It did give some of these local towns, municipalities that have plants, some good ideas on ways to save money, because some of them are spending a lot of money to dewater their sludge. One of the other inconsistencies was not all the plants are doing the operation the same way. Some are having more solids than the liquid, than more liquid. So there's a big diversity there. The other thing was only 2% of our waste was going into the landfill. Casella takes 98% or it goes to the Casella Biosolids facility in Chattagay, 98% of it. So at this time, it's not feasible. But it could be in the future.
Any question?
Is that like a leach, the solid sludge at the bottom of the lagoon?
That's exactly what it is. And not everybody empties theirs all the time. Some do it more frequently than others. And there's quite a cost to hauling that to Rodman. Taking it out, hauling it. And of course, if you're hauling a lot of liquids, it costs more.
Norwood was looking at that, and I went downstate to look at a plant, and they had a operation that basically it squeezes it and dries it out, so you're paying less to get rid of it without the water in it, right?
Yes, that's what we were looking for is a operation where the centrally located, where the municipalities could come and bring theirs in and put it in certain locations, whether it's more liquid or more solid. So it would go through a dewatering process, and at the end, looking for a Class A fertilizer for the outcome of it. But it just wasn't feasible at this time.
Mr. Reagan, then Johnny.
Rick, is there any chance that we could have Dank and the planning office develop a best practice to make recommendations to those wastewater treatment plants that are not doing it as efficiently as others in order to encourage them to operate more efficiently and reduce their operational costs?
They're municipal operations, so they're dictated by their municipality, if I'm not mistaken. But Dank is heavily involved with all these municipalities. They do work with them on a regular basis.
No, I know that they do with many of them, but you know, each of them some of them are operated by Dank, some of them are operated by the local either municipality or solid waste district. And what you were, and I may have misheard what you said, but it seemed to indicate that there were some variations in methods, and you know, there may be best practices that Dan could recommend to all of them in order to help them reduce their operational costs, because probably a lot of the town boards aren't aware that these other towns are doing it one way and their guys doing it this other way.
Yes, the difference in that is the design of the plant. Each plant, they're designed different, and they do, some make it more solid, some don't. So that would be a construction of different plants right there. There are a few of the municipalities that gain some good knowledge that will save them some money off this study. So it's not a total loss. They did get some good information from this.
Mr. Burke.
Is this the same proposal that the gentleman Bolton presented?
Yes, yes,
Who's the highway or the public works?
correct.
You know, Mark's Farm, back years ago when they were looking at proposal that would do exactly that, use a Class A fertilizer and remove liquid, and they said that they could recycle it and give the water to the cattle. I don't know if they ever followed through. They said at the time that it would cost that they speculated that what came out of that end of the cow would be worth as much as milk. I don't know whether they ever did it, but
Oh, you want to,
No, go ahead.
Mr. Denisha?
Thank you, Mr. As Rick said, the initial plan was to do a study with the goal of dewatering sludge and converting it to a biosolid. All of the municipalities in St. Lawrence County that have sewage treatment plants were on board. Everyone, which was, I thought that was great. The bottom line after the study was that we were to build a facility. It would have to be a centralized facility. Canton was the ideal place. The annual capital operation and maintenance costs were going to exceed what the municipalities were currently spending to get rid of their sludge. I think it's almost $30. But what we did talk about was that we were just dank and obviously we were looking at St. Lawrence County. And we said, perhaps we need to look at this, not St. Lawrence County, but look at it on a regional basis. Okay. Which then, obviously, again, the economy is. So I don't think it's dead, but I'll tell you, I was disappointed when we got the results of this study. I was not disappointed that it's done. It was money well spent. It's $25,000 from ARPA funds, and had we not done the study, we wouldn't know the answer. And I think we've got the building blocks here.
Mr. Hall.
I think two questions. First, Rick, you mentioned that the conditions could change in such a way that this becomes at least break even for a benefit, for a sort of net benefit. What are those conditions? What factors? What would have to change in those factors for that to be true? And are we going to be monitoring those in any way, or do we have a plan to sort of revisit this question?
Yes, definitely, Dank is monitoring this. Well, the one new development I wasn't going to talk about yet, but apparently Casella has doubled its rates in certain facilities. So that could potentially put us close to the ballpark. So we're waiting to see how things go. And Dank is keeping an eye on it and will let us know as soon as it could potentially be a viable product or adventure.
Another question. I agree, if you don't spend money. The thing I've been thinking about since the presentation of the dogs, 500 dogs in the stools have been taken a day. Where is that? Right? Then I wonder if dogs run into a cable like a farmer does. That's a big issue to a farmer. What's it to a dog? We have no need for executive session. Oh, I'm sorry.
Very much, Mr. Chair. This past weekend, Potsdam experienced a tragedy that's unspeakable. I did see some of the rescue people there, but I'd like to, for my constituents, at least thank Mr. Denner and everything that he did and all the first responders from all over the county. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any further